Okay, yeah. Okay. Now the first white men that came to into the Jerome area, which is the top of the Verde Valley, was the prospectors and the white men. Notice that the Indian squaws were dyeing their cloth things that they made. They were cotton and wool and everything, but they noticed that they were dyeing them in a little trickle of a stream called Bitter Creek, which is nothing more than a little gully that came down from Jerome. So these people said, well, that must be a mineral source of some sort. And because they were beautiful colors, green and blue and things like that. Now this was in the late 1800s. So then they decided to prospect. They went up further up towards where Jerome is now. And they found out that there was some, in relatively shallow places, there was elements of gold as well as silver, but mostly copper. From that beginning, there was two men that developed Jerome. The main developer was a senator from Butte, Montana, by the name of W.A. Clark. And he founded the United Birch Copper Company. This was the big development in there. Douglas, who we all know about from Douglas, Arizona and everything, also came up there and established the United Verde Extension, which was a smaller mine than the United Birch Copper Company. Both of these men made lots and lots of money from things. In fact, after they got started, in the first place, they called it the $1 billion copper camp. Jerome, the $1 billion copper camp.
Right there.
How about if I put it right here? Okay.
Send that to your face.
Anyway, they made enough money. They said, it was reported that they made enough money out of the gold and silver to do all of their smeltering process. And the copper actually was all profit. Gravy, as you kids now say. Mr. Clark from Butte, Montana was a very progressive man. He established good things for the community that was being built, which eventually became the third largest city in the state of Arizona. He built hospitals, libraries. At one time, the Mexican people and the American and the Anglos were not, were separated. And he eventually even built swimming pools, one for white Anglos, one for Mexicans. Now, these guys he was wonderful. Tennis courts, swimming pools, and even a golf course down in Clarkdale. They established a smelter town 5 miles down the hill from Jerome and named it after Mr. Clarkdale. The only way they first got into into Jerome and out of Jerome was by wagon trail and roads and horses. Eventually these became highways, and a train was established. A train line was established first from Jerome to what is now Chino Valley, but at that time was called Jerome Junction. That is where your mother, your grandmother, and grandfather met. No, great-grandfather. Great-grandmother. Not me. My dad came out there for his health. He was asthmatic, and he was only one of 8 or 9 children that ever left Illinois. But once he came out there, he felt so good that he never went back to Illinois, because every time he would go back there, he would get so-called hay fever. That's neither here nor there as far as the history is concerned. Just that's our own personal history. The hospitals were so well equipped by Mr. Clark that the leading surgeons from Phoenix would come up there to operate. Now that seems a little ridiculous in this day and age, because it was a long trek by train or in the 20s by car. But they did so. One of the most notable was a Dr. Greer from Phoenix, who's still supposed to be the father of modern surgery. The houses that were built on the side of the mountain were so big, were so well constructed, I mean, by Italian and Hungarians, Croatians, and Austrians, Germans, and English. These people came from all over the world. Incidentally, just between us, my dad later became a undertaker, and many of these people who died wanted to be sent back to Europe to be buried on their native soil. And the regulations were that they had to be sealed in a metallic casket of some sort, which was quite a trick. Only a plumber could do it. And we finally got a plumber that could seal the little bead around, but it was against the law to ship a remains or a corpse to Europe without it being sealed in a metal casket. Let's see. Let's take a 5. As kids, there were a lot of exploratory tunnels, and we'd go over and get go and get used carbide lights that the miners would throw away when they got fired or quit and left. Then we'd go over and steal, not really steal, we'd just go over there and take some carbide from the companies that they had bins there. You just go and scoop some out, and that's what we used. And as kids, we used to go in these diggings. Some of these, there was one tunnel right down. Yes.
I got a question. Mark, do you understand what carbide is and how it lights?
Yes.
Okay. That was my question.
That was, and the funny part of it is we found a lot of good lights. Some of them might have needed a tip where the gas came out to light it. And then there was also a little wheel on it with flint. You would put your hand over the carbide reflector, and then you would squirt it down like this, and the flint would light the gas that was in that between your hand and the... Do you understand what I mean?
I don't. I do.
Well, the reflector was about 3 inches around, about the size of well, we would take those lights, and then we would make out like we were miners, and that's where we played. There were signs to keep out, because every once in a while one of them would, although not very often would they cave in, but once in a while we'd go down, and one of the places where we've been playing, big cave in there and stopped it up. Finally, the law came around and made them blast all of those open tunnels and shafts closed. And it's a state law now that you can't leave them. The development of a mine is an interesting thing, because they made shafts, which is the same as an elevator, straight down. And the one that, the big mine, United Verde Mining Company, went down past the 3,000 foot level. That's straight down. And every 100 feet, there would be a station where you get off the elevator and go into a tunnel. Maybe it was the 500 foot level, or 700 or 9 or whatever. And on the 2,700 foot level, they built a big tunnel that, this is all underground now, but this tunnel had regular sized standard gauge tracks. These things went from the mine halfway to Clarkdale, all underground. They called it the Hopewell Tunnel. It came out halfway down it was about 3 miles long, I guess. Now that's where they did most of their mining by tunnels and shafts and things like that. Later, as they developed, they found some pretty rich ore near the surface. So they made a pit where they used electric steam shovels. Electric shovels, they don't call them shovels. And then they would, one of the most interesting things about this thing that little is known about, one of the shovels that they brought up there to work was used in digging the Panama Canal. Now, that was such a big piece of machinery that it would load 5 train cars. Now, these are railroad cars. It would load 5 cars without moving the train. In other words, usually a shovel will only load a truck or one car, but this could load 5 shovels, so you can imagine how gigantic it was. So what happened to it? One time they hit some unexploded black powder. They used to just dig in a little tunnel, and they called them coyote holes. They would dig a tunnel in, and then they would go in and put maybe a lot of black powder. Well, some of it hadn't exploded. And the reason they would do this is they didn't want to make it blow up. They just wanted to shake the earth, loosen the earth, so these shovels could just pick it up. Well, this particular one shovel hit one of those things that was unexploded, and it blew that shovel clear down halfway to Clarkdale. There was 2 operators on it. One operator was the shovel runner, and the other one was a guy that ran what they call the sticks. That's the part that he was up on the we call it the boom. And all he did was run the sticks up and down with the bucket on the end of it. But it blew those 2 men, along with that shovel, all to smithereens. There was nothing left of it. Period. Turn it off. It was a military outpost where they sent in soldiers to protect the people that lived there. Oh, everybody that lived there. All the little towns were beginning to spring up.
Well, who were they protecting them from?
The Indians.
The Indians were still wild in those days?
Well, not too wild, but that was an outpost, just like these other places that you needed protection. And they kind of policed the territory, see. And as a kid, we got an old Overland. I think it was incidentally, my dad was an aggressive guy, and he would get into businesses and out of them. He had a stage that ran from Jerome to Clarkdale, which is 5 miles, but over that old road, that was a long 5 miles.
He had his own stage?
He and another guy by the name of Bradley bought a stage that was the first Studebaker automobile in Arizona. And that was their big claim to fame. I don't.
He had Studebakers all along, didn't he?
No.
Well, he did have
No, it's the only Studebaker. Well, he had a Studebaker hearse.
truck. Didn't he have a truck?
No. They were all Model Ts and Model As.
Well, I mean when I was growing up.
Oh, when you were born, hell, he had more than that. It was fun living it, but we did what I started to say on a big Sunday. Get up real early in the morning, go clear down to Camp Verde, which is about 20 miles, is where we turn off, 15 miles, and have dinner at the Army camp there. They had a big mess, you know, Army's mess. They would probably charge 50 cents a person. They would have real good chicken, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But it was like going out to eat for a restaurant. We didn't have restaurants, not many restaurants around or anything like that. But that was a big treat as a kid to go down there and eat on Sundays.
Looking around, does it look much different? I mean, the mountain range looks the same. Is it different when you were riding around here?
No. The only thing about it was the roads. It used to take you one full day to go from Jerome to Phoenix.
How many set the tires?
No, it may have 2 or 3 blowouts, but the average time was 8 hours.
Now, what were the roads made out of?
Just gravel,
Just gravel.
dirt roads. You see them every once in a while. There's one right over there. That's it. That's one of the old roads. Now that just goes in and out and up and down. And there's no place to pass. You meet somebody, you back up and go, or pull out to one side. There was some places to pull out every once in a while, but it was only one lane.
Well, the traffic wasn't bad.
Remember that when Maxwell cars came out, they were very competitive with the Dodge. And a guy, Harry, what the hell is his name? Still is in Phoenix. He had the agency. And he said his big claim was that he drove all the way from Phoenix on the Black Canyon to Jerome in high gear. Third. We had 3 speeds. And then old Dicus challenged him to that. Then Dicus did it in Dodges.
Well, let me tell you something that happened. When I had that 34 Oldsmobile,
Yeah.
we went to Charleston to the football game, and my transmission went out, and the only thing I had was high gear. And we came all the way back. It broke just as we got there. And we came all the way back to Parkersburg, which was probably 79 miles. We had it in high gear all the time.
All the time.
And I tell you, when I got back, we burnt the clutch up.
I bet.
Because you had to, you know, really gun it and pop it out and really get it going. And then as you go up the hills, it would just start dying down and you'd have to pop the clutch. But we wore out the clutch and the clutch pressure plate doing it.
I'll bet.
But it did come back and it was on the floor. It was sitting on the floor.
All right. That's what these were. These were all on the floor, you know.
This had window shades in it. I had a footrest in the back for your feet that you could put up there.
Yeah.
But it had 2 big Continental wheels on each side.
We had an old Overland one time, the John and George. But the space between the front seat and the back seat was so big that they could, John was a drummer. George was, they would take that car and go, what the hell is the matter? You get,
Ballard. Got that from your side of the family.
no, he didn't.
What, they got their drums in them? Put the drum set in them?
The drum would sit in there, and then all their instruments, and they still had room. There was enough room between the front seat and the back seat that you never was crowded at all.
That's right. We have plenty of room.
At all Overland. I remember we used to stop here at Bumblebee and there's little towns all along here where prospectors lived and then they would farm in there. This is an interesting damn
There's a picture. Do you remember which book it is? The picture that looks like Nana's house.
Well, they could bring it.
You know, Doc, in
They
those
bring it.
days, you didn't worry about money, and you didn't worry about the problems that you had, because, you know, you didn't know about the problems that was out here in the world, like you do today. You had radios back then, didn't you?
No!
No radio.
Oh, hell no. I remember when the first radios came in. I used to go over there. The old Beth, George's wife, mother died when I was a sophomore in high school. Now that would be about 27. And the only one that had enough money, old man Galbraith, was a contractor. He was the only one enough money, and they bought one of those Philco radios. But before that, we had a little crystal set. And I used to go over and stay all night with Gerald. That's, he was a year older than me.
Quiet.
I would go and stay with him, and we would, nothing but earphones, you know. You can't imagine in a place, now if you say, well, I lived when there wasn't any damn radios. The only thing they had was telegraphs. That's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It is really nice.
Cordes. We used to stop at Cordes. Cordes was a little town.
Cordes Junction, is that where you used to go dance?
No.
Okay.
No, we used to go dancing over. What was that, Bill?
It's a CB.
Now this guy is building this town of the future out here, right here. You think he's kind of a nut? Well, I think he's kind of a nut.
Big coffee tree.
Yeah, I can sound it.
You're being a super nice little girl.
Mr. Clark, Sr., the original one, W.A. Clark the first, Senator Clark. Then he had a son that continued doing everything that he did, improving everything. They even had, when airplanes first really came in after the World War I, they even had an air show they built an airport for it. And they had an air show and an air race. And an air race consisted of a triangular course that these people set up. Amelia Earhart, this famous lady that was lost in the Pacific, round the world flyers, everything was there. Incidentally, one of the finally W.A. Clark III was the last real promoter in the valley, in the Verde Valley, and he promoted this carnival, which it was more or less. And one of the most famous flyers was a man by the name of W.W. Lynch, who was the instructor for Lindbergh, who taught Lindbergh how to fly. So you know that he was pretty good. However, tragedy struck, and these two men were avid airplane people, so they were practicing blind flying, and at that time they put a hood over their canopy so that they couldn't see out. That was the way they practiced blind flying.
Wow. Didn't have radar, did they?
No, nothing.
How'd you land?
Incidentally, they cracked up and killed them both.
Up here?
In the Verde Valley, they're up there by Cottonwood. And it was a tragic thing for the Verde Valley, because had both of those men lived, especially W.A. Clark III, he would have developed the Verde Valley into the most beautiful and prosperous place in the whole state of Arizona, in my opinion. That's enough, turn it off.